Kiddushin Daf Mem Vez discusses the concept of shlichus. The Gemara is continuing its search for a makar for the concept of shlichus and kamosi. We've already seen several makaras for that. The Gemara is now continuing to search for more makaras, and according to additional opinions, we'll sidestep briefly during the sugya to discuss the concept of makayach bezdin yafeh. Do we keep a psak that the bezdin said, even if it's wrong, because otherwise it'll create a lack of respect for the Beis Din altogether, which the community needs. So the Gemara begins the last few lines in Afim Aleph. We've already said that according to Bishul ben Karcha, you can learn the concept of shlichus from the carbon Pesach, where we have the pasuk of v'shachto esikol kahal adas Yisrael ben harbayim. And it sounds like everyone shechts, but not everyone shechts. Only one person shechts for the entire group, and therefore you see that he must be the shech for everyone else. So the Gemara says that doesn't work according to Rabbi Yonason, who uses that pasuk for something else. Gemara brings a brisa where Rabbi Yonason says that is the pasuk that teaches me that it is enough to have one carbon pesach for everybody. All of Klal Yisrael could join in one, even though there's not a kezayis for each one. You don't have to have a kezayis for each one. It's enough if you have a zrikas hadam, and that makes you yaitza with it. So if this pasuk is to teach me that, where do you see a pasuk that teaches me the concept of shlichus? So the Gemara answers very simply, that pasuk itself teaches me shlichus. If you're teaching me that all of Klal Yisrael could use one carbon pesach, obviously the one who's bringing it is a shech for everyone else, so you do see shlichus from there. Now, the Gemara follows up, perhaps clarifying the question, but there it's different because everybody has a portion of that carbon that belongs to them. They are a shutuf, they're a partner in it. So perhaps you can only have a shliach who's a partner with you. But how do you know you could have a shliach who's not a partner with you? So therefore, the Gemara gives a different source. It says, which teaches that an entire family joins together in one carbon pesach. So the Gemara says again, there's partnership there. Everyone in the family is a partner in that. So the answer is yes, but what I mean to say is that you have two psukim therefore teaching me the concept of shlichus. You want to tell me they're both talking about partners, you don't need two psukim for the same thing. So you have a concept called im'ena inyan. Even though they're both talking about partners, one must be including something else, and therefore it's referring to even where there is no partner. Because if we'd be referring just to where there is a partner, then there's no need for it. So the Gemara says, no, there is a need for it. It's to teach me a different halacha. It's to teach me the halacha of Rabbi Yitzchak, who says that there is a zechiyah. That is, you can be zeicha, you can accept something, and by your reception, it goes to someone else's possession. You can have in mind for someone else, but only an adult can do that, and not a child. And that's what you see from here, because here it says ish selaves. Otherwise, it has to be a man who was able to do that, and not anyone else. So, the Gemara says no, that halacha is not what we learn from this pasuk here, because we learned that halacha from somewhere else. That's learned from where it says ish lefi achlei, the chayis said, and there you use the word ish. The Gemara says no, that ish is for something else. That ish is for the fact that you can actually shecht a carbon pesach for one person. You don't have to have a group on the carbon pesach. One person's enough. So the Gemara says no, this opinion does not hold that way. The one who learns this drasha does not hold that you can shecht for one person. It's a machlekes, and he would say that you can't, and therefore you learn a pasuk for it, and everything else falls into place. So now the Gemara asks what Rav Gidl says in the name of Rav, that there's a different source for shlichus shel adam k'maisei, and that's from where Klal Yisrael divided up the Yerusha in Eretz Yisrael by the nasi of the shevet doing the division for everyone in his shevet respectively. It says v'nasi echad, and one nasi did for the entire group. It said v'nasi echad and nasi echad mimate tikchu linchol es haaretz. So there you see shlichus. So why don't we learn from there? What's the wrong with how come we don't follow that source? So the Gemara answers that source couldn't be shlichus because it's also the nasi is also awarding possession of the Yerusha to kitanim, and the rule is there is no shlichus for children. So therefore, that's not shlichus. What is it? Zechiyah. That is, he's accepting it and he's being a zeicha in it for them because it's good for them, and therefore it's zechiyah. So the concept of shlichus you don't see from there. So Gemara asks, hold on, how can that be zechiyah? It's not good for everyone. Not everyone was happy with the portion they received. Some wanted a mountain and got a valley, and some wanted a valley and got a mountain. So it's not a real zechus. So the Gemara therefore says, okay, so the answer is that this is teaching me that you could do a zechiyah for a child even if it's not a pure zechus. Now, not obviously not if it's bad for him completely, but as long as it's generally giving him something which is positive for him, even though he may choose that he doesn't want it, you can do that zechiyah even though it's not for a katan. You can do that because you're acting on his behalf, and he can't act on his own behalf as a child. This halacha is brought by Rava by Rav Hu, the name of Rav Gidol Rav, that when orphans divide their father's property, the court sets up an apotropos, a advocate for each of them, and whatever the advocate decides, whether it's good or it's bad, that is what is chal for them. And obviously, they can't do something compared to him on purpose, but even if there's an aspect of it that they don't desire, you still can, and that's learned out of this pasuk. Nasi echad mimate tikachu. Now, having mentioned the topic of the advocate for children in dividing their father's estate, the Gemara quotes a sugi we've seen several times in the last few Masechtas, Yavamis, Ksubis, and Gittin, and that is Rav Nachman bringing a machlokes between himself and Shmuel about can the Yisayimim later protest against the arrangement made for them by their legal advocate when they were children. So Shmuel says they are allowed to, and Rav Nachman himself says they are not allowed to, because Makach Bezdin Yafeh, then the court will have established something and it'll be rejected by the people themselves. Everyone will say, you see, what the court does doesn't count, it's not worth anything. So the Gemara asks, so we see elsewhere that Rav Nachman does not hold of that concept. That's because of his psak and Machlokas Tanaim. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel against the Chachamim, if the court makes an evaluation and they're off by a sixth of the actual price, either a sixth higher or a sixth lower, that evaluation and the calculation is off. So Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, we stick with it because Makayach Bezdin Yafeh, and the Tanakama says, no, we cancel it. And Rav Nachman has like the Tanakama that we do cancel it. So I come here, he does hold the concept of Makayach Bezdin Yafeh. If there he passes like the Chachamim, not that way. My answer is because there the Beis Din made a mistake. If the Beis Din makes an actual mistake, you're not going to say Makayach Bezdin Yafeh. A mistake is a mistake. Mistake has to be fixed. You only say it in a case like this where there's no mistake. So my answer, if there's no mistake, so what are they protesting against? My answer is they're protesting because they would have preferred a different direction. The value is even. They weren't shortchanged. They just had a personal preference. They would have preferred a different field. There you say that they can't undo what the court has already decided. Now, also on the topic of Makayach Bezdin Yafeh and splitting the property that is inherited, the Gemara quotes 3 halachas of Rav Nachman and Rava, who moderates those halachas. So Rav Nachman says it's one central halacha, and that is when brothers divide the property that they inherited from their father, it's considered to be that they purchased it from each other. That is, they all inherited the entire estate at once, and each one swapped his portion in exchange for what he's giving the other one, and therefore it is like a sale, and therefore it has the halachas of a sale as far as fraud. So if the valuation ends up being off by less than a sixth, the deal still stands. If it is by more than a sixth, the deal is canceled. If it's by exactly a sixth, the deal stands, but they have to return the devaluation. They have to return the amount in which they are off between each other. Now, on that, Rava limits all those 3 things. He says that which we said that at less than a sixth, the deal stands. That's only if the split was calculated individually, that they themselves, the brothers themselves, made the split. But if they hired an agent, a shliach, he could say to the shliach, you messed me over, and therefore what you did is void. It's what we call l'skuni shedaticha le'lavasi. I only appointed you to do what's good for me, but if you end up doing something bad, that was never an appointment, and therefore it's void. That which we said that if it's more than a sixth, it's void. That's only if they didn't say originally that we accept whatever the court decides. We're going to have the court divide it for us. If they do accept whatever the court divides for us, then it stands. And the Gemara quotes some machlokes we just saw between Rav Shimon ben Gamliel and the Chachamim of Makayach Bezdin Yafeh, and here Rava is saying, like the opinion of Rav Shimon ben Gamliel of Makayach Bezdin Yafeh. And then that which we said that if it is exactly a sixth, then the sale will stand, but you have to return the amount that was off. So on that, Rava limits it by saying that it's only if the split was made in valuation. That's they evaluated how much a property is worth, divided in half, and gave land worth that amount to each of them. And if that valuation turns out having been off, and one brother got much more than the other one, there you say that if it's exactly a sixth, it stands, and they have to return the difference. However, if the valuation was in size, they decided we're going to split the size of the land, and everybody will end up with bad land or good land, whatever it is, but we're just splitting it by size. So there, if they measured wrong, and they got wrong sizes, there it goes back no matter how much it is. And that's because a size is a pure mistake, and you can't say, well, I'm going to stay with the mistake. No, that's only an evaluation. But size, it's got to be returned. And the Gemara quotes where we see that in a statement of Rabbah, it says anything which is a measure, a weight, or a counting that was off by even less than a sixth, it has to be returned and calculated over again. Okay, this is what the Gemara has to say about dividing property and Makach Bes Yafa. And then the Gemara returns the concept of Shlichus, and the Gemara is going to get into the idea of Shliach L'Dvar Aveira, where you send somebody to do something which turns out to be a sin. So the Gemara quotes a Mishnah. The Mishnah says if somebody sends a flame in the hand of a Cher, Shait of a Katan, and it causes a damage to someone else, so we say that in Dinei Adam, the court cannot make him obligated because he didn't actually do anything. But in Dinei Shamayim, they're going to hold him responsible because he set up the dangerous situation by sending a object which is a danger to others in the possession of someone who cannot properly control it. Now, the Mishnah continues and says, but if you put it in the hands of an intelligent person, and that intelligent person went and messed up and caused the fire, it's not his responsibility. That person is responsible for what he did. So Mara asks why. He's a shliach, and therefore we should say shluchas adam kamaisa, and the sender is the one who's responsible for what happens. So the Mara answers, this is the concept of ein sheich l'dvar avera. If you do something which is a sin, you can't say, well, so-and-so sent me. You have your own brain. You're supposed to listen to Hashem, not to a person who sent you. This is what the Gemara calls Divrei Arav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishalim. Hashem said do one thing, and someone sent you to do something else. You have no excuse that you listen to that someone. You should have listened to Hashem. The Gemara now asks, but we have another situation where we do see Shlichus L'Dvar Aveira. So the Gemara quotes a brayso talking about Me'ilah. Me'ilah is the halacha you're not allowed to use something that belongs to Hektish. If you do, you have to return it, plus a fine, plus you have to bring a carbon Me'ilah. So the Gemara says, what if you send somebody to do that in Me'ilah? So the halacha is, it depends what he does exactly. If he follows the shlichus exactly, then the sender is responsible. If he changes the shlichus, like he told him to use one shirt, instead he used a different shirt that belongs to Hektish, he didn't do the mission he was sent on, and therefore it's his own responsibility. So my question is, if he did do the mission, if he performed the shlichus, why do we say that the sender is responsible? It should be the shliach's own responsibility for choosing to follow that. So the Gemara answers, because we have a pasuk of Exeris HaKasav that teaches me that the mishalech, the sender, is responsible in a case of Me'ilah. It says chait, and the word chait is linked to a pasuk about truma, and we will see the word chait as well. In Me'ilah it says v'nefesh kisimol mal v'chata b'shkaga, and by truma it says v'shambas m'sharti v'layisa olav chait u'meisu v'ki chalaluhu. And in Truma we know that there is shlichus, that is a specific limud we had a few daf earlier, and therefore here in Me'ilah we also know specifically that there is shliach here. Someone says, okay, so then you have a pasuk that teaches me that there is shlichus to do a sin, so let's say there is shlichus l'dvar avera. Why don't we learn from Me'ilah to everywhere else that there is shlichus l'dvar avera? My answer is because you have another pasuk that says the shlichus l'dvar avera, and you have shnei ksuvim b'en ka'echad melamdim, the rule that if you have two psukim saying the same thing, you can't learn from there to anywhere else, because the second one limits it to those two cases, because it's unnecessary. Where is that? Where do you see shlichus somewhere else? The Gemara says that's by the concept of shlichus yad. That is, if somebody is a shomer, he's watching someone else's object, either as a hired watchman, or as a renter, or a borrower, or whatever it is, he has someone else's property that he is holding on to as an observer for the other individual. So the halacha is that he can't use it unless he was specifically given permission to use it. He's not supposed to be using it. If he does use it and something happens, now he's financially responsible for it, and that's called shlichus yad. So the question is, at what level of shlichus yad, what level of usage makes the watcher responsible? It's Machokas Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says even if he just thinks about using it, then he's responsible for it. Beis Hillel says no, he has to actually use it. What's the source? So Beis Shammai says, the pasuk says, Al kol dvar pesha, on anything that he did wrong. It makes him responsible for it. Beis Hillel says no, it says sholach yadai. It says he has to actually send his hand on it. So they each say, what are you going to do with the other pasuk that we have? On the one hand, it does say Al kol dvar pesha. On the other hand, it does say sholach yadai. So Beis Shammai says to Beis Hillel, what are you going to do with the kol dvar pesha? And Beis Hillel responds, that's to teach me that even an eved or a shliach violates it, he still is responsible for that is the sender is responsible for shlichus yad, and therefore now he's ever after responsible for what happens to it. So therefore you have two psukim, shlichus yad and me'ilah, and it's Shnei Ksubim Ben Echad Im Lamdim. Now the Gemara, of course, is going to ask what do you do according to Beis Shammai, what do you do according to the one who does not hold of Shnei Ksubim Ben Echad Ein Lamdim, and these are all sugyas we shall see on the next stop.